What if I told you the tributes from his bandmates were too little, too late? That the man who defined their sound died after just turning down one last chance to share a stage with them? That his death wasn't the end of a rock and roll story, but the final bitter chapter in a 40-year feud? Here's how the spaceman's journey ended in the long, dark shadow of the band he never could truly escape. Like, subscribe. Thank you. So, on October 16th, 2025, the music world gets the news. Ace Frehley is gone. He's 74 years old. The statement from his family is heartbreaking. They talk about surrounding him with love as he passed away in a hospital in Morristown, New Jersey. The cause feels cruelly mundane for a man who lived such a huge life. A few weeks earlier, on September 25th, he had taken a fall in the studio. Just a fall. It was described as minor, a word meant to reassure everybody. A temporary setback for a guy working on his next record, Origins Volume 4. But instead, it led to a brain bleed, and his condition never improved. On October 16th, the dreaded reports confirmed that he was on life support, and then the family had to make that impossible decision. Ace Frehley, the spaceman, the rock god who once seemed indestructible, was brought down essentially by a slip and a fall. The tributes started pouring in: rock stars, fans, everyone mourning the loss. And then came the words from Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, the two men he had built an empire with and then spent decades fighting. They called him an irreplaceable rock soldier. They talked about his brilliance, his unique talent. On the surface, it's what you would expect bandmates honoring a fallen brother, but for anyone who had been paying attention for the last 40 years, the words felt complicated. Because the story of Ace Frehley and Kiss isn't the story of brotherhood. It's a story of a messy, bitter, public divorce that never really ended. Let's go back. It's 1973 in New York City. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley have a band called Wicked Lester that's going nowhere, so they decide to start over. They need a lead guitarist with flash and fire, so they put out an ad in the Village Voice: lead guitarist wanted with flash and balls. This guy shows up to the audition wearing two different colored sneakers, one red. One orange, looks like a total space case. He's quiet, plugs into his amp, and just starts wailing. Doesn't say much, he just plays. That guy was Paul Daniel Frehley from the Bronx. They weren't sure about the sneakers, but they were damn sure about the guitar playing, and he got the gig. He became Ace, a nickname he got as a teen for being good at getting his friends dates. And when the band decided to wear makeup to become characters, he became the Spaceman, or Space Ace. He was the one who sketched out the band's famous double lightning bolt logo, a design that would become one of the most recognizable emblems in music history. From the very beginning, he wasn't just a guitarist, he was part of the DNA. Kiss blew up. They were more than a band. They were a phenomenon. The makeup, the pyro, the spectacle lit was all-consuming, and Ace's guitar was the engine. His solos were raw, crazy, sloppy sometimes, but always full of swagger. They weren't technically perfect, but they were dripping with attitude. Think of that iconic driving riff in Cold Gin, a song he brought to the band but wasn't confident enough to sing himself. Or the blistering solo in Shock Me, a song he wrote and sang after being electrocuted on stage in Florida in 1976. That was all Ace. He had that quiet, cool charisma contrasted with Gene's demonic bluster and Paul's starry-eyed showmanship. On stage, while Gene was spitting blood and Paul was prancing, Ace was the effortlessly cool alien letting that smoking Les Paul do the talking. Ace was the reluctant star, the guy who just wanted to play his guitar, preferably with it rigged to shoot smoke and rockets. But inside the machine, things were breaking down. The chemistry that made them brilliant on stage was a toxic mess offstage. Ace and original drummer Peter Criss were the partiers of the band. They lived the rock and roll lifestyle to the fullest. They were the street guys from New York, and that energy was part of their appeal. Gene Simmons famously was a teetotaler and a very shrewd businessman. Paul Stanley was the driven frontman, laser-focused on the band's success. The clash was inevitable. Creative tensions grew. Ace felt like his songs were being overlooked in favor of Gene and Paul's more commercial material. He was getting tired of the makeup, the character, the whole damn circus. The breaking point was the 1981 album Music from the Elder. It was a full-blown orchestral concept album about a boy being trained by an ancient order to fight. Evil It was as far from rock and roll all night as you could possibly get, and Ace hated it with a passion. He felt like it was a betrayal of everything the band stood for. Legend has it, he refused to play on large parts of it, and the solos that are there were reportedly recorded at his home studio in Connecticut and just mailed to the band. By 1982, the friction was too much. He was out. It was his first escape. Ace went solo and formed Frehley's Comet, a band that kept his hard-rocking, guitar-driven sound alive. And he had a genuine hit. Back in 1978, at the absolute peak of their fame, all 4 members of Kiss released solo albums on the same day. Pretty wild acta commercial move, never seen before or since. While Gene, Paul, and Peter's albums did okay, it was Ace's record that was the runaway success. His album was pure rock and roll, and his cover of New York Groove became a top 20 hit, the only real smash from the 4 records, and it became his anthem, a declaration of independence. And for a while it seemed like he had successfully broken free. Ace Frehley was his own man, making his own music. He was proud of it too. Years later, he'd boast in interviews that he was the most successful solo artist of the 4 original members. New York Groove was a big reason why. He was proving that he didn't need Kiss, but the shadow of Kiss is long. In 1996, the unthinkable happened, the original 4 members, spurred by a massively popular appearance on MTV Unplugged, agreed to a reunion. They put the makeup back on. The world went nuts. The Alive worldwide tour was one of the biggest of all time. And for a moment, it was like 1977 all over again. The magic seemed to be back. But behind the scenes, it was the same old shit. Same arguments, same resentments. The reunion money was huge, but it couldn't buy peace. Ace's sobriety was a struggle, and the power dynamic with Gene and Paul hadn't changed. By 2002, Ace was gone again, this time for good. And that's when the war of words really began. For the next 20 years, the feud played out in public and interviews, tell-all books. Gene and Paul would criticize Ace's work ethic and his struggles with substance abuse. They painted him as unreliable, somebody who squandered his immense talent, and they replaced him in Kiss with another guitarist, Tommy Thayer, who had once played in a Kiss tribute band. And what many fans saw as the ultimate insult was that he wore Ace's spaceman makeup and played his solos note for note. It was like they were trying to erase him to prove he was just a replaceable part in the Kiss assembly line, a costume anybody could wear. Ace, for his part, never held back. He got sober and fired back at Gene and Paul with both barrels, called them out for being driven by money. Turning Kaisis into a nostalgia acta corporation with a gift shop, he accused them of disrespecting the legacy he helped build. The fight got ugly and personal, filled with he said, she said accusations that kept rock journalists busy for 2 decades. Total soap opera. Fans felt like they were forced to pick a side. Were you with S, the rebellious, soulful artist who created the sound door? Were you with Gene and Paul, the pragmatic leaders who kept the Kiss machine running at all costs? The battle lines were drawn. Fast forward to the months before his death, Kiss was on their end of the road farewell tour. There were whispers and hopes that a sand may be. Peter Criss would make a guest appearance for the final shows at Madison Square Garden. The final bow with the band they started, in the city where it all began. According to reports, Ace was invited to participate in some way, and he turned it down. The details are murky. Some say it was about money, others about how he might be presented. But the message from Ace's camp was clear. He wasn't interested in a manufactured, cute photo op. And after everything that had been said, after another man had worn his face on stage for 2 decades, a quick wave and a smile would have felt hollow. It was a final act of defiance. He was done. And then just a few months later, he was gone. He was still working, getting ready to finish Origins Volume 4. His tour was booked through the end of 2025 before the fall forced him to cancel. He wasn't finished, but it was that fall that took it all away, took away any chance, no matter how small, of a true reconciliation. It left the feud hanging in the air, unresolved, forever. So when Gene and Paul released their statements calling him irreplaceable, it struck a nerve with a lot of people. Irreplaceable. They had literally replaced him for 20 years. Fans immediately jumped online, pointing out the hypocrisy. They posted old interview clips where Gene and Paul had trashed Ace's playing and his character. They saw the tributes not as a genuine olive branch, but as brand management. It felt like an attempt to smooth over a messy history to present a clean, unified front in the face of tragedy, but the cracks were too deep. The bad blood was too public. The wounds were still open. And the tragedy of Ace Frehley's death isn't just that the legend is gone, it's the story of a broken brotherhood. Of a man who helped create a monster and spent his life trying to escape its clutches, only to be pulled back in again and again. Ace Frehley was a Bronx kid who wanted to be a rock star, and he became one of the biggest in the world. But the price was a piece of his identity, a piece he fought to get back until the very end. His death did not end the feud. It cemented it. It leaves us with a question that will be debated in comment sections for years to come. Were the tributes real, or was it just the final move in a long, sad game? And of course, the spaceman is gone, and he took that answer with him. 2025, what a shitty year, huh? We lost Ozzy, Ace, John Sykes, Brent Hines, Rick Derringer, Sly Stone, Brian Wilson. That's just a start. It's a sad day for all of us who dug Ace's work with Kiss as well as his solo stuff. The man was truly irreplaceable. And to you, I just want to say thank you for joining me in celebrating Ace. If you haven't joined the family yet, smack that subscribe button. And if you could kindly hit the like button on the way out the door, I do appreciate it.